it's good to be back. I like a return event. It would suggest that maybe people are listening a little, and it does feel. I'm reminded just when we were preparing there of the number of people involved in grassroots football. It does seem important to both thank them for everything they're doing in the community, but also get them up to date with what's happening both as a country, so the government's responsibility, but then have a bit of a chat about what the SFA are doing around that. So lots of things today, some of which, if I'm honest, Lewis, some of which are causing me anxiety. There aren't many low-risk things left to open. So it means the list we're presented with looks a bit high risk. But the prevalence of the virus in the country remains low. There are some outbreaks, so you can't have missed that there's a thing going on in Aberdeen, and there's a thing going on in Cooper Angus in Perthshire and a few others. Schools came back, so it feels like a very, very important time. So we've opened some other hospitality stuff today, and we've also given a date of gyms and swimming pools of the 31st, which is a week on Monday. But the big thing for you and this crowd is that outdoor contact sports for all ages. That feels like a massive step. And we talked about it the last time we were on, how the first step was under 12s. It was partly because we knew they wouldn't transmit the disease or get so sick, but also to test the processes. And if we can't do it for under 12s, then we can't do it for others. So that's gone really well. I think we've seen a lot of health and well-being initiatives. The SFA, other sports have embraced that. And now we've taken the step, which I hope people will embrace and do safely, the contact sports, all ages, still outdoors and still distanced off the white line, remember. Once you cross the white line, you get an exemption. Or the other side of the white line, no exemption. So it feels like quite a big deal.
Certainly does. There will be a lot of people that will be pleased to see these guidelines come into play. And of course, there's so much to talk about from your side. But when we focus in on football, like you say, all ages have got reason to be optimistic, and matches is a big thing, isn't it, to come back? Yeah,
it is. So each layer. So there's the big route map, let's call it the government route map, which is what's happened today. And then each sport then has their own route map back. So I've got a wee pal, he's 8 years old. He's one of Scotland's best 8-year-old gymnasts. And he's been raging mad for weeks with me. But Scottish gymnastics has a route map of its own, a phased route map back. And he's been doing outdoors, now he'll be able to go indoors from the 31st. So each sport has had to work out what that means for them, how to keep their people safe, what having a COVID officer means, and the SFA have been, I think, really, really good at that for the grassroots game in particular. We can talk maybe another time about the professional game, where they've had an interesting couple of weeks. But the grassroots game, I think, has its own route map and has a way back to what will be the next normal. And training is one element of that. Then intra-club games, so playing within your own club, and then eventually, and everybody wants this back, playing against each other again, because the game is fun, but it's also competitive.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is about that level of understanding you touched on as well. And I'm sure the other thing that people need to remember is the dates that we speak about. Obviously, Monday the 24th onwards, that these next steps come in for us, and onwards into September, where there will be more to follow. These are still indicative dates, Jason. Of course, this has to be taken that way and realised that way by many.
So we're going to give you the 24th. So it seems unlikely we're going to take the 24th off you, unless there's real chaos over the weekend. So the 24th is good. And the following that, the 14th of September, which is the next big change. And that includes some very big stuff. That includes, for instance, potentially people in stadia for the professional games, for Murrayfield, for Ibrox, for Celtic Park, whatever, lots of sports. So we're going to have, we're not sure about that yet. And that's why we give this kind of presumed date, but we have a reverse gear if we need it. Remember, the whole thing, everything, even what we're presently allowing, depends on the virus staying low. And you can see little risky moments around the country. You see Aberdeen, you see Perthshire, you see northeast Glasgow with a house party that is some school kids not transmitting in the school, but transmitting at the house party. That just begins to worry you a wee bit. So there is a risk that everything could go backwards. But the present plan, prevalence low, test and protect working well, people following the rules, is that we'll be able to get to that 14th, and then more will be able to happen. And the SFA will then follow that with its route map of what the SFA think that means for grassroots football, kids football, girls football, whatever that sport is.
Yeah, you rightly touch on gymnastics there for an example, but football, a lot of people watching and a lot of people looking at the guidelines will think football does look a bit different from other sports, but there's good reason for that, of course. And from your position, do you see the good reasoning behind that?
I do, and I think football, the professional game, like professional rugby and professional golf we had back last week, they're getting special privileges, so that feels like a separate thing. So they were allowed back to work before other sectors were allowed back to work. But the grassroots football is so big. There are so many people who love it and embrace it, and it's well run, that we've got to be cautious on that way back. So I'm pleased the SFA has worked on each of those steps and worked out what each of those steps will look like. And the detail of that is up to you, not to me, but it seems sensible. If you're going to have a quarter pitch outdoors contact for under 12s, then let's work out what that looks like. How many people is that? Where are the mums and dads? Back in the car, probably, rather than there. And now we're going to do that same thing for adults, over 12s and then adults. So the space will have to be thought about and what numbers. And I know you guys have got a route map ready to go about what that will look like from Monday, the 24th.
Yeah, we do indeed. And of course, you spoke about the different outbreaks that we have seen, unfortunately, across the country. In football, which is a national game, which spreads so far, there is also the travel side of things as well. And initially keeping things local, but with a view eventually, like you touched on, to take it across the country.
So that would fit with our public health advice. Let's go back to the basics here. What we're trying to do is not give the virus the opportunity to jump from person to person. That's what we're trying to do in hospitality. It's what we're trying to do in workplaces, and it's what we're trying to do in sport and recreation. So I'm thinking the easiest way to do that is be outdoors, not use indoor changing areas, not do big crowds. So if you can keep in a bubble of X number of kids, that seems better than bringing 300 kids together suddenly. I know we've done that in schools, and people will think this is illogical. I thought you were just it was a free-for-all over here. No, it's not a free-for-all. You've got to just take the risk where you want to take it. And we can't bring everything back because that's too risky. So yes to outdoors, yes to smaller groups, yes to no competition initially and then getting back to competition. And I think your point about travel is a good one. So keeping that local seems to me a very sensible way to start. Make sure the processes are working well. Make sure the mums and dads can tell the kids it's going to look a wee bit different. Everybody will know each other. And then gradually, with a fair wind and the virus staying suppressed, which relies on everybody, footballers and non-footballers, we get back to that you could travel maybe locally for games, and then back to what we used to do, where the leagues and the competitions were much more widely spread.
And another important part of the next steps is the role of COVID officers, of course, and the training that's provided online. That is crucial in your opinion, do you think, Jason?
It's probably the most important single intervention we've done, because I cannot be, and the Chief Medical Officer, Gregor, and I cannot be at every event in every sector. So we're relying on people to, and I don't really like the word, but we're relying on some level of enforcement. I don't want people to get in trouble, but at some level you need to enforce the rules, because the rules are there to protect everybody who's playing the game, their families and the population. So we came up with an idea that major events and sports would have COVID officers, and you're going to have them in workplaces, you're going to have them all over every sector. And Sports Scotland have put a training package together with health protection people, with expertise from public health, to see what that means. So you need to understand the physical distancing and what's your role in helping people with sanitizing, and what should you do with the more vulnerable in the community? How would you approach people and communicate with people who aren't following the rules? Because that seems important. And then at the SFA, because you're an authority who runs the game, there may also have to be sanction at some level if a club doesn't follow the rules, or if there's consistent breaking of the rules. I don't want any of that. I want it to be fun and done in a friendly way. And the COVID officers, I think, will help us do that. I've got a kind of vision of friendly men and women around the game with maybe a little yellow tabard on with COVID written on it that becomes, and I don't want to be seen as the kind of enforcer at the door. I want it to be communication with the kids. So you might do a little induction for the kids when they arrive for their first game. You might talk to the young people about, look, here's the rules. You're going to put it at risk if you don't do as you're told. So we want it to be open, engaging, communicating, and the COVID officers are crucial in that.
Yeah. You touched rightly at the start that level of thanks to grassroots clubs, to players, coaches all over the country. I guess the next step is people start to get a little bit optimistic would just be to temper expectation. Would you give any other message to everybody out there itching to get back to football?
So I think that's great. I think the enthusiasm for getting back to football and sport generally and well-being and all of that, it teaches kids and adults so much about team working, about problem solving, maybe even some conflict resolution at times. And I think officials want to go back, those who manage the game want to go back, and those who play the game want to go back. And I'm really encouraged by that. I look forward to the five-a-sides games happening, but I want them to do it in a way that's safe. I don't want people to think, somebody described it last week to me as the next normal rather than the new normal. And that seems like the right way of thinking of it. This pandemic is not over. In fact, if you look globally, this pandemic is accelerating. It is not slowing down. 270,000 people got this virus on Saturday. 270,000. So we need to be careful. Now that, I don't want to take away from the fact that five-a-sides is back and contact sports for 17-year-olds is back. That's all good. And we should embrace it and we should do it. But we should just be careful. It is not normal. And if your five-a-sides feels normal, you've misunderstood. So the game should feel normal, but around the game should still feel very, very different from how it was last December.
And just on five-a-sides, Jason, of course, you spoke about on the pitch, off it is going to be different, but I guess everything around it as well, even travelling to it, arranging things, is going to still look different, and that's something to consider.
Yeah, Lewis, five-a-sides is a good example, but the same rules apply to whether we're playing seven-a-side in kids then. But the rules are, what we've changed here is on-field contact. So you are now allowed to tackle and dribble and play the game as you remember it. What we would ask you not to do, of course, is hug after a goal or pretend you've got an injury so the doctor has to come on and take an unnecessary risk. All of that needs to go. And you can see in the professional game, they've actually done a pretty good job at that in recent weeks. But the other thing that's different is getting to and from the event, the exercise. So you're going to have to be slightly more careful than you were before. The exemption applies from across the white line. So you can't stand in big groups waiting for the five-a-side to finish before you. You've got to be distanced. I would expect you to know who's coming. So if a contact tracer needs to get in touch, you're going to know the 10, the 12, whoever's coming, and you're going to have contact details for them. Not in any way to pry, but if there's a positive case. So remember the pubs a few weeks ago in Aberdeen. That starts with a single positive case. You then imagine the detective work to try and find the connections around that. So anything that makes that easier. And professional companies, so if it's a five-a-side company, they will do that. They'll be told to take contact details. But anything people can do to help with that is going to be good. And come changed and leave changed, I'm afraid, and leave without a shower. Now we don't want we want all that back to normal, but for now, that's how it's going to have to be. And just think the people we've opened swimming pools, they're going to have to arrive changed and leave without showers. So it's not that bad if you're playing five-a-sides to go home in your shorts. You'll manage. But it's going to feel just a little bit different for a little bit longer.
Yeah, it certainly is. Professor Jason Leitch, thank you very much for joining us yet again.
Thanks, Lewis.